Risk assessment simply means looking at each specific task and considering what is the safest way to complete it. This helps us become aware of the hazards involved in doing the job and taking action to prevent injury. As a building or construction worker, you are obliged to ensure you only carry out construction work you are competent to do, report significant risks, cooperate with others and coordinate work to ensure the health and safety of you and your co-workers, ensure you notify a supervisor of accidents and near misses, and follow site health and safety rules and procedures. The aim is to develop a safety culture, communicating methods of work and ensuring everyone knows how to work safely every day. Before starting a task, it is essential to think of what is the safest and best way to do it. Documenting this helps in assessing the risks. There are 5 steps to completing a risk assessment. Document the activity. Assemble those involved in the activity and write down the tasks step by step. Identify the significant hazards. Next to each task, identify what part may cause injury to those doing the work or to anyone else nearby. Document the control measures. For each identified hazard, list the measures that need to be put in place to eliminate or minimize any likely risk of injury to those involved. Identify who is responsible. Document the name of the person responsible for implementing the control measure. And finally, monitor and review. Make sure the activity is supervised to ensure the documented process is being followed. The documentation should be reviewed whenever an activity changes, when there is a change of personnel, or after an appropriate length of time. This documentation provides a written record of the procedures to be used on a task. As it is a record that can be used in court, it should be signed off by the parties who have responsibility for the tasks. When risks are identified, control measures can be implemented and followed. These measures are known as the hierarchy of hazard controls. You must address each hazard with a solution from the hierarchy in the following order. Firstly, elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment. Always address the hazard from the top down until the risk is eliminated or controlled. These control measures are often used in combination with each other. A hazard is something which, in context, has the potential to cause harm. A useful way to categorize hazards is to identify them as physical, chemical, electrical, and biological. Then look at each work area to see if any of these apply. A more direct way to consider hazards is to look for scenarios that might occur. Some common construction-related hazards are falling from heights, trapped by something collapsing or overturning, and being struck by a vehicle. These hazardous situations are likely to cause sudden and acute injuries. There are other hazards that may cause chronic long-term harm that must also be identified, such as contact with harmful substances, dust and fumes, exposure to noise, and vibration from handheld tools. However hazards are identified, it is almost certain that for any one activity, there will be many hazards. Each one has to be risk-rated, as each will need to be covered by the range of control measures adopted. When you are risk assessing, you need to record your findings in a systematic way, showing a proper check has been made of the inherent hazards and the risk rating for each. You must also factor in other activities that are carried out concurrently. These other activities might create hazards or make the risk of some greater. In a full assessment, these other activities must be taken into account. While companies might issue guidelines for common activities,
risk analysis is a technique to identify and assess factors that may jeopardize the success of a project or achieving a goal. This technique also helps to define preventive measures to reduce the probability of these factors from occurring and identify countermeasures to successfully deal with these constraints when they develop to avert possible negative effects on the competitiveness of the company. Reference class forecasting was developed to increase accuracy in risk analysis. Analysis begins with a study of the risk issues that have been identified. The objective is to gather enough information about the risks to judge the probability of occurrence and the impact on cost, performance and schedule if the risk occurs. The primary process goal of analysis is to understand the business process to inform the following incremental stage in the overall risk management process. While recognizing the analysis stage will be tailored to suit the particular requirements of the assignment or duty, when an overview of the whole business is being obtained, the analysis stage will be sufficient when it satisfies its sub-goals.
It's important when you spot a hazard in the workplace that you do something about it. Remove it, isolate it, or report it. If you don't, someone in your workplace may get injured. The consequences of an injury can be far-reaching. So remember, if you're aware of it, take care of it.
Risk identification focuses on identifying and ranking project element, project goals, and risks. Risk identification requires a great deal of pre-project planning and research. The information necessary to do this varies according to the phase of the program. During the early phases, requirement, threat documents, and acquisition plans may be the only program-specific data available. They should be analyzed to identify issues that may have adverse consequences. You have many tools for risk identification. However, they all follow the same basic concept of taking you systematically and step-by-step logically see risks. Depending on your project scope and resources, you should select the appropriate tools and how many of them to use. Documentation review. For your review to be considered as a tool, it should be structured with a clear purpose and note-take, not just an ad hoc scan. Diagramming techniques. Here you use visual representations to stimulate your brain for identifying even more risks. You can use cause and effect charts, flow charts, and influence diagrams. Checklist analysis. It gives you a structure for identifying risks. You implement this tool by first selecting the right checklist for your project. Assumption analysis. At the beginning of your project, you had expectations and made guesses. A variety of different graphical and tabular methods exist for portraying and ranking risk results. Risk ranking can be helpful for both risk analysis and risk handling. Most of the methods are simple to implement and their usefulness is primarily governed by the accuracy of the underlying data. However, faulty methods of prioritizing or ranking risks are commonly used. In the worst case, a flawed approach can yield erroneous results that may lead to suboptimal designs and focusing scarce program budget, personnel, and schedule resources on the wrong risk issues.
Slips, trips and falls are a common cause of injury. Poor housekeeping, poor design of workplaces, and poor work practices are all factors that can contribute to the incident. By following some basic safety principles, for example, conducting risk assessments, keeping walkways clear of obstructions, cleaning up spills immediately, and keeping workplaces neat and tidy, the occurrence of slip, trip and fall injuries can be dramatically reduced. So remember, if you're aware of it, take care of it.